Hello, it's time for tonight's book study on Rise of the False Gods. Thank you for joining me, and I hope you're going to enjoy tonight's class as we're discussion, not class, but our exploration of Rise of the False Gods. We are continuing with the Big Ten. As you recall, we started that last night. But I actually wanted to step back a second to where we ended off last night before we move on. Before I do, I want to remind you, you can go to YouTube and search for Rise of the False Gods, Alicia Leslie, and you can see all the videos. You can subscribe so you don't miss anything. I invite you to please be free to make comments, ask questions as we go along. And I may not see them right away. I may not see them till after, but you put them in there. If you got a question or anything, I will answer it. So I am going back to page 43. That's where we left off at the bottom of the page. But before we move on, one thing we didn't go into is these two particular types of sin that if you are from a traditional, I think, Catholic background, I don't know that this is in other faith groups, but there are two types of sin, mortal sin and venial sin. And for those of us who were raised in the Catholic Church, it was quite, it was amusing when there was a man, I guess he's in the government, but I don't think he's a politician, but he was spewing off about something that the Democrats had done, and he kept saying, and that is a venial sin, and that is and he said it like 4 or 5 times, and I'm going like, okay, because let me explain the difference between a mortal sin and a venial sin in the traditional church. A venial sin is the type of sin that weakens the relationship between or unity with God, and it's not a deliberate going away from God, and it does not wholly block the flow of grace. So a venial sin is something you kind of do, and then a lot of times we slide through it because what did it say? It says it doesn't block the inflow of grace. Now, a mortal sin, on the other hand, is a grave action committed with full knowledge of its gravity and full consent of the sinner's will. Let me go back and do that over again. A grave action committed with full knowledge of its gravity and full consent of the sinner's will. Now, that is, we see it every day. We see murders, we see bank robberies, we see all kinds of things like that, where the people know what they're doing is not right, but they do it anyway. And right now, I'm really kind of torn up about the people who choose to. I saw a video today of a bunch of young people, mostly a couple of older ones, but mostly young people, dancing through Target without masks, saying, "Take off that mask, take off that mask," and they're singing and they're dancing, and knowing what I know and what science says about the virus, what would we consider that? A mortal sin? A venial sin? I guess in one instance, they are at some point really ignorant of the true danger of the virus, or they wouldn't be doing it. That's a part of being in the dark. That's not what mortal sin's about. Mortal sin's about not caring, being in the dark doesn't care whether you're in the dark, in the light, you know about it and you don't care and do it anyway. We talked about sin being something that negates a divine idea. And so we have to sort this stuff out. And I'm not getting traditional, but it's like if you don't know something is maybe negating a divine idea or hurting someone or something like that. Well, you'll learn from it and that's it. If a person doesn't care and doesn't care afterward, that's what the church would consider a mortal sin. And it's something that's, even the word, we talk about our mortal body, our physical body, our human self. It's like the depth of human self. But because God is all good, if that person ever has an enlightenment and decides to turn another way, then I believe redemption is for everyone. But what you have to do is acknowledge it. You can't fix what you don't acknowledge. So again, it doesn't mean someone's inherently evil, but I see one of the worst kinds of and I'm going to call it sin. I know there's Unity people probably jump all over me and say, we don't do that in Unity. But frankly, drug dealers. There's drug dealers that are addicts that sell drugs to support their habit. And that's sad. And it's kind of pathetic because I've seen addiction up close and personal, and it's not a pretty thing to see. And people that are good people with all kinds of promise and all kinds of skills and gifts and talents, the drugs want to take their life. And it is unfortunate that the addiction can be so strong, they will do whatever they have to do to get that drug, that even if that means selling it to someone else. But the real evil part, the real backward part would be a dealer who doesn't use, just straight up does it for the money. And what is that false god? That false god is money. Money and self. They don't care about anybody else. They just care about themselves. Now, on the other hand, the addict, they have a false god in the drug. That the drug is going to give them a high, a good feeling, a wonderful, elated, take away all the troubles of the world feeling. However, that drug is killing them. It is taking their life. You can't sort it out. Somebody's thing might be earning money and working really hard to the point that they spend so much time pouring their life into work so they get money, so they get stuff, that they don't get to live their life. So that's another false god. A false god is a belief in something out there that can give us the good that we want, but it really can't. So we're going to move on today because I could just go on about this all night, but one of the worst false gods is self. It's narcissism. Anytime we put ourselves before all that is good for the whole, huge mistake. Okay, so we're on to number 2. Woohoo! And that is, you shall have no strange gods before me. Well, we just kind of waltzed into that, didn't we? The strange gods can be money. They can be drugs. They can be a belief, such as I had one time, that if I was not in a relationship, that I was not worthy of a relationship. Man, that was pretty pathetic. And when I think of all the suffering I did under that false belief, my false god was relationship. I have relationships. I have fine relationships. And I suppose if one day God presented me with someone I wanted to spend the rest of my life with, I wouldn't object. It's nice to have someone, you know. It's also nice to be able to be on your own. There are so many kinds of false gods. So when we make someone else our God, when we have a false God, what we do is we look to places other than God, spiritual principle, divine order for our good, and it's never really there. False gods make promises, but they are lies and lead to deception. I know this sounds crazy, but marketers are very good promoters of false gods, because they can sell you all kinds of stuff that, you know, you don't really need, but you are caused to believe that is going to bring you good. You know, in the sales industry, there's two things. There is fulfilling a need or creating a false need. So the best things come from fulfilling a need. And so when we're buying something, when we're out spending our money, if we're saying, oh, yeah, I really want that, and we have to ask ourselves, you know, what good, what is good is going to come out of this thing? And is it going to be a false God, a false good, or is it going to be good? And I think we've talked about that before with the 3-day rite of rescission. Whenever you buy something really big and expensive, and this came from the days of door-to-door and in-home sales. You had 3 days to change your mind after you signed that contract. I think it's kind of a good thing, because why did we want to buy that thing that we change our mind in 3 days? We had a sense of good. And after we had a chance to think about it, we didn't really want it. So if you're really tempted to buy something and you're not sure you have the money and you're not sure, rather than commit the sin of cutting yourself short financially or putting yourself in a difficult position financially, give yourself 3 days to get back into your right mind. Think about 3. Remember that, what is it? What was that? Schoolhouse Rock. 3, it's a magic number. Give yourself 3 days before buying something expensive that you're not quite sure you really want. I always ask myself, am I going to have to dust it? Because if I'm going to have to dust it, I probably don't want it. I love knickknacks. I love to look at them. I do not like to dust them, so I kind of try to avoid them. I'll enjoy looking at them in the store. We get so many promises from false gods. If only I had, if I were married, I would be happy. Well, if you can't learn to be happy without being married really isn't going to make you happy. But that doesn't mean that marriage is not a good thing. Marriage is one of the best divine ideas God ever came up with. You have a good marriage because you made a good choice. That's wonderful. You have a bad marriage because you made a bad choice, an error choice. I think that one needs more than 3 days rite of rescission, you know. So we have to be always looking for what is the good. Okay. A strange God is anything we think of as a God that is not godly or in agreement with principle. It would be a false god. Sometimes we make money a god, or sex, or power, or self. There are so many variations of false gods. So many things that we think the promises of the world will give us that will fulfill us and make us whole, and nothing could be farther from the truth. It says, you shall not make a graven image. Now, what is a graven image, you know? Graven image is something that is made out of clay. That's what they were talking about, is they were talking about Sometimes they'd make images out of clay, and then they would dip them in gold, so they'd be golden figurines that they called gods. And it wasn't the fact that they called them gods that was wrong. It was that they were worshiping or giving worth to something that wasn't even real. Now, some people say that, they hold it against the Catholic Church because they have statues in the church. And they're under the false belief that people are worshiping the statues. But the statues are images of the saints or Jesus or whoever that we are being inspired by. If you've ever gone, you see all the holy pictures in churches, the Sistine Chapel, all the beautiful artwork. We're not worshiping the pictures. The pictures are inspiring us. They're called icons. Many religious pictures are called icons. Why did they have them? Because the people, when they were making them, the people were illiterate. They couldn't read, the scriptures. They didn't know anything. So they had the pictures to tell the stories. You may have heard of the Stations of the Cross. They are the pictures following Jesus through the crucifixion. And so that was to help people tell the story. It was in an oral tradition before they were literate. So we don't worship the statue. We don't even worship our mate, because to give worship, to hold something above true good, all that is good, that's focusing on an outer source for our inner fulfillment. A celebrity could be a graven image. Lord knows they got substance, don't they? We look at them. Oh my gosh, I'm old enough, and it wasn't my generation, it was before me, but Frank Sinatra, who you guys probably didn't even hear of, was a singer back in the, oh my goodness, probably in the 30s and 40s, but girls would actually faint when, I am on page 44 for Cheryl, but this part's coming out of my head. I'm at the middle of page 44 in the book. All right, back to Frank Sinatra. The Beatles, now that was my generation. The Beatles were, oh my goodness, the girls were throwing their underwear on their panties on the stage, and it was crazy. They worshiped these celebrities as if they were gods. We still do. I always said, though, at least they were singing. Sometimes people worship these celebrities today, and I don't even know what they do. It's fortunate that back when I was a kid, we had sports heroes. They were looked at like gods, but the one difference between then and now is that most of the sports figures, and they were held to a very high standard. So we looked at them and were inspired for them for the good things they did, for the way that they were sportsmanlike and stuff like that. Unfortunately, that's kind of like faded. We'll talk about that another time. There are celebrities today. Sometimes they're from YouTube, and you go like, who is that? But people worship them, and they think they're wonderful, and they've got tens of thousands and sometimes 100,000 followers. There are people sitting in their living room like this, doing a thing. Now, I would think it was stupid if anybody decided to worship me to give me more worth than I had because I'm sharing wisdom. I hope the wisdom I share can change your life. But I am not a god. I am a person scrambling through my stuff, writing the books the best I can. Why? Because something blessed me, and I want to pass it on to you so your life can be blessed too. Okay. When we are busy worshiping or giving worth to material and self-indulgent things, The law of mind action is still engaged, and we will draw to us the stuff we focus on. And that includes fears, wrong relationships, false beliefs about ourselves, and even illness. A false god is fear. Because if we let fear run our life, if we put fear before God, I mean, if we had real faith, would we really be fearful? Seriously? If you really believe that God was all powerful and all good, would you really be fearful? Remember, you're human, so you probably would, to a degree. But as my faith grows, my fears subside. Yes, I get fearful from time to time, but what do I do then? Just like driving off the road, I hit those rumble strips, boom, 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 and I get back on track. And the more we work on it, the faster we get back on track. So remember that one good, that God, the good, is good for all. It's everything that is good and good for everybody. If something is good for you and seriously not good for someone else, it's really not good for you. That's weird, isn't it? But it's true. Good has to be good for everyone. And that's one of those paradoxes. It's not always the same thing, but we're going to do paradoxes more down the road. We're going to actually, let me see, how we doing? Oh, golly, I'm out of time. I didn't get to where I wanted to be. I've got 5 minutes. Look, don't know if I should go into it or not. I'm going to go back and look at some of my notes. Okay. If we think our body, if we spend all our time focusing on our body's beauty, even if that means that we do what is that? Unnecessary plastic surgery. We really look fine. I don't like my nose. Does it work? If your nose works, it's good. If you say I'm ugly, you're putting beauty before God. God created us. Divine universe, divine mind created us. We can't be ugly. You can only be ugly on the outside. What you don't want to be is ugly on the inside. Okay. We don't want to base God on our personal concepts and make God into a human. We are supposed to be growing into the image and likeness of God. Instead, we make God into the image and likeness of us. Okay? All right, I'm almost slipping into tomorrow, so I'm going to quit. I'm going to quit while I'm ahead. Tomorrow, we are going to move on to thou shalt not take the name. Now, you think about that one. Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain. What does that mean to you? Ponder it until tomorrow. And let's see, yeah, because tomorrow is, God, the week is slipping by. It's Friday already. Okay, have a great night. God bless, and I will see you tomorrow.